Welcome, everyone, to morning 2 of our 2024 St. Louis Startup Week. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Becky Bertram. Becky is the owner of Savvy Technical Solutions, a consulting company based here in St. Louis and in the Metro East. She helps her clients build custom solutions on Microsoft platform of products, including Microsoft 365, and the PowerPoint platform. She's a 15-time SharePoint MVP, Microsoft certified trainer, and has authored numerous on-demand courses as well as Microsoft exams. Becky is married with 3 children, age 13, 11, and 8. Her hobbies include shuttling her kids to activities and listening to them talk incessantly about Minecraft. Let's give a warm hand of applause. Warm welcome. I can't talk this morning.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Well, I appreciate you guys all coming out very early on this beautiful fall morning we've had, but I know there's a lot of traffic coming in from Illinois, so I'm glad you guys could make it here. How many of you guys attended any of the sessions yesterday? Out of curiosity, a lot of you. Awesome, awesome, sweet. Well, I'm excited that this is my first time participating in St. Louis Startup Week. Whenever I post slide decks and stuff, I never put my contact information so I don't get spammed. So this is your chance. If you want to write it down, take a picture, something like that. If you want to reach out to me, I love talking with folks in the community. It brings me great joy. And so anything you want to ask, just feel free to give me a call or email me at that email address. So today, as you can see, you know that we're talking about lessons on running a solo consulting practice. A little about me, she already gave you the rundown, but part of this story is really about just sort of my journey, and a lot of this is going to be very personal. As a Microsoft MVP, the deal is that Microsoft basically says if you go out and evangelize our products for free, then we will give you access to the product teams. So I get to fly out to Redmond once a year and meet with the product team at Microsoft and hear from the horse's mouth what the products are going. We get a lot of NDA content. We know what's coming up next. And in return, they appreciate it too because we give feedback sort of boots on the ground. Sometimes they can be sort of isolated and just think they know what's going on, and we can come back and say, hey, in the real world, this is how it works. So that being said, a lot of times when I speak, I'm speaking at very technical topics that are very out there. What I'm speaking about today is very personal, and I feel very vulnerable, I guess, up here in front of you guys. So I appreciate you guys all taking the time to show up, and just appreciate that I don't normally get nervous before I speak, but I was very nervous about this today, just because talking about your life journey, you're like, there's nothing more personal than that, right? Like what you've been through. But my hope is that I can encourage you guys to be able to say, hey, let's take that first step. And to be perfectly honest, there are some folks, what kind of spurred on this talk is that through the years, I've had so many people that came up to me that were clearly unhappy in their current job. And they just looked at me and they said, wow, that must be amazing to own your own company. You must make so much money. That must be great. And for about half of the people that I speak to, I'm like, you've got what it takes. Absolutely. Leave that job. You would be phenomenal. You would be so much happier. Go do it. But the other half of people, I go, you would not be happy. Don't do it. Run away, right? Stay where you're at. And that's being totally honest. Some people this is not going to suit them. So that's where I want to encourage you. Oh, I got to not bump it. Part of this talk today is just to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And so if you're deciding this is what I want to do, just to know what's in store for you, right? And if it's something that you may say, you know what, that's not what I want to do, that's okay too, right? So we're here because we want to encourage startups, but I want people to go into it with eyes wide open. I'm guessing since you're here, you're hopefully in that formal category of let's do it, but I just want to talk about some of the personal experience I've had through the years. So just to give a brief sort of overview, and not to give my whole life story here, I kind of have struggled with like, what do I include and not include? My father was a programmer in the 60s. He worked for the Environmental Protection Agency, and he was a statistician that was doing epidemiology statistics, and they got one of the first computers ever. I grew up in North Carolina, so it was in the Research Triangle Park that sits between Durham, Raleigh, and Chapel Hill. And so I grew up literally coloring on dot matrix paper and punch cards. That was our coloring paper. However, he passed away when I was 7. So even though I had that sort of in my blood, so to speak, it's not like he taught me anything, really. I was 7. So that was, it's sort of in my background, but that's not actually where I gravitated to. So I ended up getting a degree, a double major in art history and German with a minor in art. I really enjoyed art, but I liked the analytical part. So there's a part of my brain that's creative, but there's that part of me that's analytical. And so I studied abroad for a year in Austria, but I was actually really, really homesick. So I came back, and then after I graduated, I had missed being with all my friends. And the dot-com boom was happening. This was 1999. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to do this computer thing for a little bit so I can hang out for next year, and then I'm going to go get my PhD in art history, and I'm going to teach. That was the plan, and here I am 25 years later still doing it. So that was, oh, I still have notifications on. Look at that. Sorry. I hope that didn't pop up. So my brother gave me a book, said, Teach Yourself HTML 4.0 in a week, my senior year of college. So I read that. I learned HTML, which nowadays is sort of like, you know, my elementary school kids are learning HTML, but that was a big deal back in 1999. And so as it was my senior year of college, I literally cold called people to say, hey, can you hire me? I know HTML. And I actually landed a job. So here I was with this, graduated with honors and all this stuff, but I was starting out knowing nothing other than having read a book. Good and bad. So the good news is I got an opportunity to work for a company, and they placed me out at Amway, because I went to college up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. At the time, Amway was building a .com site called Quickstar, and at the time it was the largest health and beauty site online. They literally would give me a Photoshop document, and I would slice it and dice it and put it into HTML and put it online. And every night they would literally take HTML files and copy and paste them out to the server. This was before active server pages. Like, this is like a way long time ago, right? So the idea, the bad part was that the owner of that company eventually got his own episode of American Greed. So, you know, I don't know how many people can claim that, but turns out he was a huge fraud. So I was able to, luckily, move on from that company before that was all revealed. If you ever want to look it up, it's Barton Watson. It was quite the big deal. He had a Ponzi scheme running, and I remember showing up to the office my first day, and there was a his and hers Rolls Royce. It turns out later that he didn't own a darn thing. Like, he was leveraged to the hilt, and it was all smoke and mirrors. But anyhow, different story. You can get into the salacious details of that later. So I ended up getting hired by a company that did programming. At the time when I graduated, people were about even between software development and graphic design. And that's why I was like, I'm on the graphic design. And all of a sudden I got hired by people, and they were like using all these TLAs, all these like 3-letter acronyms. And interestingly enough, because I was a German major, I had learned a new language before. And so into this was like learning a new language. It just was programming. And so it was a whole different thing. So every night I would literally go up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. They had a Panera up there before I knew it was the St. Louis Bread Company. And I would sit every night. There'd be like 5 feet of snow outside, and they had this little fireplace. And I would go get a little hot chocolate. And I studied a book about this big to teach myself to program. When I finally passed these 4 Microsoft exams, it meant to me as much as my 4-year degree, because I was like, well, I liked my 4-year degree. This was all completely new, and I was completely self-taught. But it meant a lot to me to be able to, but that was the drive I had to be like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing here, and I have to figure it out. So after that, then, so I was working for a company, but I wanted to move back to North Carolina to be with my family. So I actually packed everything up and moved home. Well, that happened to be right when the 2003 recession hit. So I had a hard time getting work. It was a great period of time. I woke up every day, drank coffee, was living for free at home. It was fantastic. But I got a job then out of the blue. Someone said, we need someone to work on Verizon.com, but you have to do it in Dallas, Texas. I literally didn't know where Dallas, Texas. I mean, I had flown through the airport like once, but I'm like 22 at the time. My mother literally back in the day took those giant maps and took a highlighter, highlighted the highway to get there. I took 3 garbage bags of, grocery bags of clothes in my back seat of my little Toyota Echo, which was like the size of a Matchbox car, and I drove myself to Dallas. I was there for 2 years, and I was full-time employed, but I was technically a contractor. But it was a very toxic work environment for a lot of reasons. I finally got to the point where I went to the doctor thinking I had an ulcer. And that's when I was like, maybe this is not the right place to be. I didn't, but the stress level was really high. So somebody said, we have a 3-week gig working at Washington Mutual Bank in Seattle, but it's for 3 weeks. And I was like, I'm giving up, I've been here for 2 years. I'm giving up this full-time gig to do 3 weeks. And I finally was like, I'm just going to take the plunge. Well, that 3 weeks got extended and extended and extended and extended. And so I ended up being there for 3 months. But every 3 weeks, I kept thinking my job was going to come to an end. Well, these were the days of Monster.com and CareerBuilder.com. And so I would spend a good probably 10 hours a week talking to recruiters online, looking for my next gig. So at that period in my life, I would do a 3-month-long project, a 1.5-month-long project, 2 months. I'd have a pause between them, and then I moved to the next one. After that, then, I got married, and I moved up to Mount Vernon, Illinois. If everybody knows Mount Vernon, Illinois, it was a big change to go from Dallas, Texas to Mount Vernon, Illinois. That was a little hard on the system. After about 1.5 years there, I was like, I gotta do something. No, I think it was more like 9 months. I had actually been offered a job with Microsoft in St. Louis, but I had said, hey, I had dated my husband long distance, and I was like, I'd like to be in the same state as him, thank you very much. But after a while, I was like, I gotta get out. So I did 9 months with Microsoft, but it showed me that I had been on my long enough. I was so unhappy. And it was because I wasn't used to the corporate politics of a big company. And I was like, everybody else thinks this is normal. The point is my brain had shifted. I had gotten used to not knowing where I had become comfortable with actually the unknown. And to me, having the self-determination balanced out, not knowing what was coming next, and I had a threshold for that. And I realized that other people didn't, right? Like other people at the big company, they were more concerned with, I don't know, I guess I don't want to go into what they were. It didn't match anymore. I remember being at Microsoft in a giant room where they're like, we lost $1 bajillion because someone screwed up a project at Best Buy. They lost like millions of dollars. And they're like, well, we need all of you guys to put in, 80-hour weeks instead of 60-hour weeks. And I remember thinking, like, how does that work? Like, I don't feel personally responsible for someone's bad decision over here. But I just realized at that point that I was like, I'm just not cut out for this. So after 9 months of that, I quit. But here I was in St. Louis and Mount Vernon, and I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any contacts. So for a couple years, I actually started, for about 5 years, I subcontracted through other companies in St. Louis. got to know people, and then eventually, and I was very happy doing that. I was sort of a pseudo-employee for one of the companies. But over time, I realized I can't show up at a company in St. Louis and they're like, I thought you worked for so-and-so, you know? I thought it's a big little town, and eventually I was like, word's gonna get out and it's gonna be awkward when they were like, and so finally I was like, I had a lot of trepidation about going out on my own, because I was like, I know how to do technology. I don't know how to do contracts. I don't know how to do sales. I don't know how to do marketing. I don't know how to do people management. I was like, there are so many things that so some people jump into it with sort of starry eyes. I was the opposite. I was like, I'm terrified. Like, I know what I'm getting into because I'd worked with other consulting companies through the years doing these 1 gig at a time. So finally, 13 years ago, I had my first child. I had been self-employed, but then I incorporated Savvy Technical Solutions in 2012. And then I had 2 more kids after that. So you talk about trying to start a business while having kids. It was pretty exhausting. But I started building up a client base in St. Louis. So I give you that. That's like you say, I was like not sure how much of that to include, but let you know, there were steps along the way. My whole journey of where I'm at now was not just I woke up one day and ta-da, there it was, right? I had to do this, and I was full-time, and then I did a gig, and then I started doing 1 gig at a time, and then circumstances changed, and then I started saying, okay, I'm not gonna subcontract, I'm gonna do it on my own. So my encouragement to you guys is just saying, we can have these grand ideas, but they don't always materialize all at once, but that's okay. That's how you learn along the journey, right? Sometimes we want to jump to the end, but that's not the case. The next thing I just want to say is this presentation is from my point of view. So when you hear me talking, I will say I know that we have people from all different industries, all different walks of life, clearly different genders as well. So not everybody here has personally given birth to children or things like that. But that being said, my context is technology. Yours may be something completely unrelated. So some stuff will be sort of specific to consulting and technology that I'm going to talk about. But I just want to say, in general, I'm trying to make the topics here applicable to everybody. But that's just my frame of reference. And the other thing I just wanted to say is that I started this journey when I was single, and I didn't have the responsibility of kids. So I'm just going to be completely transparent here. I had someone come up to me one time, and he was the sole breadwinner and had like 7 kids, and his wife was a stay-at-home wife, and he was like, I'd love to do what you're doing. And I was like, please don't. Please don't, for the sake of your family, this is not the time to do that, right? So I'm just saying we all have to be like, there are stages in our life of what we're doing, and I just want to call a spade a spade. It's hard at the beginning. There's a lot of unknown. I personally started out when I didn't have the responsibility of children, and now I do have the blessing of a partner, you know, a husband who can encourage me, and there have been a lot of times where I haven't made a lot of money, and he's helped balance it out, right? Health benefits and all that. So not saying, again, I'm not trying to discourage anybody, but just be like realistic about this, guys, right? You need to figure out a way to do this that you can make a go at it and be responsible with your life. So let's talk about you. So the idea here is, though, I first want to kind of talk about the personality traits that are going to suit you to work for yourself. I suspect a lot of you in this room have these. So the first degree is really a high comfortability with the unknown. I kind of mentioned that a little bit already, right? A lot of these traits I want to kind of contrast to a lot of people that have been at big corporations. Some corporations, if you're in a really chaotic environment, you may never know what's coming next, so there may still be a high degree of unknown. But in general, a lot of big corporations have, if it's a big company, there's a division of labor, right? Like you wear this hat, and somebody else does this, and somebody else does that. So it means people become very highly specialized, right? And you kind of know, I wake up, and this is my job duty, and this is what I do, right? When you own your own business, you just really have to be okay with sometimes just not knowing. There's a lot of not knowing, and you really have to be okay with that. So basically, when I started out and I was doing 1 gig at a time, I was, sorry, I lost my train of thought. When I was between gigs, I'd have these 2 or 3 weeks between gigs, I would just I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get another gig, and I'm going to not have any money, and I'm going to be broke, and it's going to be terrible, and I don't know where the next one is coming from. And again, I was a young adult. I would speak with my mother a lot, and she would just laugh at me. She goes, you've gotten it the last 7 times, you'll be fine. I'm like, but maybe this time is different. Maybe I won't, right? So I had to build up my threshold with knowing, you know what, there are some times over time when business is going to be really good, and other times where it's not going to be. For my line of work, I've discovered through the years that macroeconomic factors affect me quite a bit, but I experienced them on the micro level. Oh, that client said yes, somebody turned down my contract. I just go like, oh, well, they just didn't want to work with me. What did I do wrong? What's wrong with me? And then I go, oh, wait, I talk with other consulting companies, and they're like, oh, we had to let people go because nobody's buying right now. And then I go, oh, I thought it was just me, right? So there's a lot of stuff that's frankly just outside of your control, right? We just had an election, inflation, coronavirus. I've lived through the dot-com bust, the recession 2 years after that, the Great Recession in 2008, the pandemic. I've experienced a lot of up and downs, and that's just going to happen, but you kind of have to be okay with that. But that being said, again, I don't want to paint it all gloom and doom. I want to talk about the plus side of that. Once you can get over that, it's this concept of self-determination. If you're at a business and they tell you, for instance, again, working in technology, I know some people that they were put on, their job was to manage SharePoint servers, which is an on-premises product. Once everything moved to the cloud, these people still had the same job. And they're like, my skill sets are becoming dull. How do I do the next thing? Because my skill set's going to become outdated. You have to ask for a manager. You have to beg somebody to give you that responsibility, right? You're like, please, please let me do this new thing. When you're self-employed, you get to decide that, right? So there's the things that affect you negatively as a business owner. You also have the self-determination to fix. Right? So you're not stuck being like, oh my goodness, my skills are deteriorating because they're just having me pigeonholed in this job. You're like, if I need to learn it, I need to learn it. So SharePoint, I worked with a product called Content Management Server 2001 and 2002. It got consumed with SharePoint 2007. So as I'm trying, recruiters back in the day are using keywords. And I was like, there is no Content Management Server anymore. So if people go, well, you don't have any SharePoint experience, recruiters don't know that SharePoint is Content Management Server because the keywords are all wrong, right? I interviewed with 15 different companies before I could give somebody a chance to learn SharePoint. That gave me a chance with that because everybody was like, well, you don't have this on your resume. So the point is you really have to, work at it. But you have that opportunity when the unknown is happening to make that change, right? You're not waiting on anybody to do that. Another story is when we first got married, my husband would say, so what are you going to get paid this month? And I'd say, I don't know. And then 3 days later, he'd be like, so how much have you billed this month? I was like, well, I can tell you how much I've billed, but I have no idea when they're going to actually pay me. Because this was at the time of the Great Recession where people used to pay in 15 days and now they're paying in 60 days. And I was like, I know what I've done, but when it comes in the bank account, I don't know. It was every 3 days he'd ask me the question in a different way. So if you had to guess, how much money would it be? And I was like, I don't know. And so that was, again, one of those things where we had to learn about that. Now, for me, again, a way to strategize against that is finally about 10 years in, I started paying myself a salary. I started putting everything in a bank account. And so instead of our family balances doing this, the bank account and the business did this, but at least we had a baseline to do family budgeting on. But those were one of those things where we had to work through, right? The other thing is a high degree of integrity and self-motivation. This seems rather like duh, right? But the reason I say this is, again, if you look at my own story, I sat and spent every night teaching myself programming. Sometimes people, if they come from corporate environments, they're used to somebody saying, well, part of your improvement plan is to be able to, your goals are to learn this or that. Nobody's going to sit over your shoulder and say, you know what, you could watch Netflix, but you got to learn this thing. But you know what? Ain't nobody going to do it but you, right? So you've got to be able to have that get up and go to do it, right? In terms of that as well, some people, this is not such a big deal. I did this slide deck kind of closer to coronavirus. Most people have worked from home now. But I have a lot of people that say, I could never work from home or work for myself. I'd just be tempted to spend all my day frittering away with laundry and dishes or whatever it is, right? Or going to the store. I like getting paid. So I'm highly motivated to get paid, and I'm not going to charge a client when I'm not working, right? Unfortunately, I have met other people in the industry that will happily charge people when they're not working. And again, now that people work from home a lot more, this is sort of a broader problem, right? But I personally deal with a great deal of integrity. I knew someone that would double bill. He basically was working at home and charging 2 different clients at the same time. You can go to jail for that, right? And so people try and get by, but I'm just saying, please, there's nobody looking over your shoulder is what I'm saying. When you do it, you have to have something in you that says, this is the right way to do it, because nobody else is gonna call you on it, right? And so that's why I'm saying, please do what you're doing with integrity. This even comes into like billing. I had another colleague of mine that said, well, she was selling a project as time and materials, which is for every hour you work, you charge an hourly rate. And she goes, well, if a junior person did it, it would take like 3 hours, but I did it in 1 hour, so I charged 3 hours. It was basically like mechanics pricing, right? And I was like, if you told the client that's what you're doing, okay, but you didn't. Like, you are actually charging for hours you weren't worked, right? So I'm just saying, I've seen a lot of ways where people try and kind of stretch it, right? Just don't do it. Don't do it. If you need a better billing model, come up with a better billing model, but be transparent about it, right? Don't get yourself in hot water. There's just a lot of times, again, where you've got to have that internal integrity because nobody's watching you, right? I would say that probably goes for anybody working in any occupation, right? I would hope that we would all have integrity. I'm just saying sometimes that accountability from outside is not there, right? And along with that, I would just say basic day-to-day tasks. I'll move to that in a little bit, but just being able to have, some people really want somebody to check up on them and to see how they're doing. You're not going to get that if you're solo. So I'm not saying you shouldn't be solo, but it's going to be up to you to find those people and say, hey, help me out here, right? Because again, corporate environments on the plus side have a built-in model. You have managers, you have peers, you have people that are checking up on you. When it's just you, when I first started consulting, I went on a project, and a lot of times I was the only developer doing content management server. There'd be other people that did other products, and at first I was like, hey, nobody else does what I do, so like I could do a terrible job and they won't know. This is great. And then very quickly I was like, oh crap, I could do a really terrible job and nobody's gonna know. This is awful, right? And so I'm just saying having that internal drive, but you're saying I'm just saying some of those structures in place that we're used to in corporate environments, if they're not there, you have to either have that discipline on your own, or you need to find the people that will put that discipline on you, right? The next thing is flexibility. So this is another big thing, I feel like. When people come from corporate worlds, and again, I'm making gross generalizations. I understand that everybody's coming from a different place, so please understand I'm not trying to make huge blanket assumptions here. But like you said, the division of labor thing. I know at Microsoft there's a guy there that was like, well, I really want to do development, but I'm on the sales team. I'm not allowed to touch SharePoint. I can only talk about it, but I have to give it to somebody else because that's not my job. There are a lot of places like that, right? On the good side, though, a lot of people really like doing what they do. So when I started out, it was very much like I had more work coming out. I mean, SharePoint was like the fastest growing server product of all time. So I had work coming out my ears. So it was very easy. They could say, do you want to do the infrastructure? I was like, no, I don't do that. I just do development. It was great. I was very much in my lane and did what I want to do. Once I started my own business, though, and I wasn't landing these huge projects, I very quickly learned I cannot be that choosy. And I get frustrated now as a business owner, how many people are like, I do the peas, but I don't do the carrots. And I'm like, for crying out loud, right? So you really have to have a flexibility. I hate writing contracts. I absolutely hate writing. It always feels like a term paper for me every time I have to write a statement of work. But you know what? If I hired a lawyer, I tried to hire a lawyer to give me a template. They charged me $5,000 for, quite frankly, garbage. And I was like, I can't hire a lawyer to do this. I have to figure out what statements of work are. I don't like the part of the job, but I got to do it, right? And so I'm just saying there's a lot of times where I made a decision a long time ago that I'm not going to do Amazon Web Services or Google or Linux or whatever these other platforms are, Java back in the day. I'm just like, I was like, I am Microsoft focused. So I do have walls on that, right? Like I'm not, if you're a plumber, you're not a carpenter, right? Like just fix, like that's okay. But my point is to come in and be like, even now, I have people coming in saying, do you do like compliance? And I'm like, well, kind of. But the point is you need to really have the flexibility and not be so rigid or your business just isn't gonna fly, right? There's some stuff you don't know how to do. And you really just have to kind of get over it. For me, my mental block was infrastructure. I was like, I am not a networking person. I don't know computers. I'm not like really excited about identity management and stuff like that. So when people asked me about that, it felt very black box-ish. I was like, I know how to program, but I don't know about security settings and all that. I forced myself to take some exams. And really taking an exam for me is like reading the dictionary. It forces you to go through and like read the help documentation. And once I read it, I was like, well, it's not what I want to do, but it's not scary anymore to me because I was like, oh, that's all it is? Oh, okay. So when clients ask about it, I may not volunteer that that's what I do, but if they talk about it, I'm not ignorant about it anymore. But there was sort of this of like, oh, I don't do that, I don't do that. And once I kind of forced myself to learn that stuff, I was better for it. So I'm just saying you've got to be able to sort of get out of your box, because as a business owner, you're going to wear all the hats, like all of them, right? So time management, this is a big one. And again, I think for a lot of people working from home, this is this is probably less groundbreaking now than it would have been if I talked about this 5 years ago. But this is another thing where I think people sometimes can struggle if they're a business owner. The beauty of being a business owner is you wake up and you're like, no one is telling me what to do. People are like, freedom, right? They're like, this is awesome. But I always joke, it's kind of like, if you ever had that time where you like put your winter coat on, like the first day, cold day, and you find that $20 bill and you're like, hot Sam, I got a $20 bill. And then all of a sudden you're like, I have $120 of stuff that I want to buy with this $20 bill. It's very much like that when you have to determine how you spend all your time. No one is telling you what is most important. So for me, given day, I mean, I have a to-do app I'm going to show you guys, but it's a list app. I have like 17 things every day, and it's like my iPhone is busted. I have to go get an iPhone, but then I have to like write a contract that I'm a week and a half late on, but I also have to build some code. Which one is most important? I don't know, right? Who gets to decide that? I get to decide that. So one of those things that's a blessing and a curse again is when you're in a corporate environment, you have a boss who says, these are the priorities for you. This is what you need to do, right? And so the good thing is it provides structure. I know what the target is. I know what the middle of the target is. You know, I'm gonna pull the bow and get the target. When you're self-employed, what is the target? It could be over here, it could be over here. It's probably all of them at the same time, right? And so that self-determination means that you really have to spend a lot of work prioritizing each day. It's sort of like writer's block for some people, and I know for me, again, I'm speaking personally, there have been days I just wake up and I just sort of have paralysis because I'm like, there's so much to do. What do I do, right? So but again, I want to go back to that self-determination thing. Let's talk about the positive side of this. For a lot of clients, so I have deadlines I have to meet with different clients. As you guys know, some deadlines are real deadlines. Some deadlines are, I just want it, and we have to put something stake in the sand or it'll never get done. I intuitively know from years of experience which deadlines really have to happen and which ones I can say, hey man, I didn't get to it. And they're like, okay, no worries, we'll do it next week. I think if you work for a company and somebody says, why didn't you call that person back? You're supposed to call them back. Even if you know that it's okay, you have to like communicate that to somebody else, right? And so I'm saying when you have self-determination, it means sort of that gut, that intuition, that experience you have, relieves some of that stress sometimes because you feel like you can have that ability and nobody's gonna look at you and say that doesn't need to happen, right? So it cuts both ways. I'm just saying as a personality type, you have to be okay with creating that structure for your day, right? So next I want to talk about the business. Let me keep an eye on time. Okay. Using your size to advantage. This is one of the biggest things that I struggled with when I started out because I had subcontracted under these big companies. And I was like, who's going to do business with a one-person shop? I'm so tiny. No one's going to do business with a tiny little company that's just me. And I really did not put myself out there very well because I was really struggling with who's going to hire Becky Bertram. But then I watched, there was an ad for Dove, or the oil of Olay. I can't remember which came first. But oil of Olay was like, Dove was like, we don't leave an oily grime on you after you use our soap in the shower. You are nice and smooth and you don't have oil on you. And then shortly thereafter, Oil of Olay came out with an ad that said, and again, I heard this on the radio, they're like, why would you use that other soap? It just all goes down the drain. We have soap that actually stays on you and moisturizes you. And I just laughed because I was like, well, clearly it's going to be one or the other, right? Like either it stays on you or it doesn't, you know, but each of them were saying we're not like the other. And it sort of made me realize that I had to start using that size to my advantage. So when I came and spoke with people, I was like, listen, I don't have people that I'm trying to keep employed. In fact, I'm so busy, I don't want you to keep coming back to me. I want to teach you to fish and have you on your way, so I'm moving on to the next one. So I was able to come in, I was like, we don't have meetings about meetings about meetings. I'm not paying someone for a huge project plan. I'm a get her done kind of girl, right? So I was able to start portraying my weaknesses as a strength. So you really have to start coming in and saying, hey, what is it that my strength is that the big companies don't have? And let's lean into that. And it's amazing how there's a large company in town that the company that I had subcontracted under before, they were there. And I wasn't trying to like boot them out or anything like that, but we were on a call. They had an engineer. He struggled through a problem. I was sitting on site with the client. He was on the phone for like an hour and a half for a decision to get through this technical issue. He couldn't do it. We got off the phone. I said, click this, 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 and this. And I solved it in like 10 minutes. And she was like, man. So when the company came back and said, we're going to get rid of this other company and bring you in, I said, listen, I don't want any bad blood. I'm not trying to burn any bridges here. They're a big company. You know I'm just me, and I don't have a huge bench of help desk or anything like that. They said, we don't care about the size of the company. We care about the expertise, and you have the expertise, and we want you. And that was so validating to me, because I thought all those years where I was feeling really like less than, right? But it worked. And now that company is one of my hugest customers because they've grown rapidly. So it's been gratifying, right? All right, be bigger. So this is bigger than you are. Okay, number one, have a legit social media presence and website. Duh. I literally had a friend, though, she had worked at a company that I had worked at or contracted through. And she was like, oh, well, I just have LinkedIn, and I don't really, I was like, do you have a website? No, I haven't built a website yet. And I'm like, seriously, folks, nobody thinks you're a real company. Wix, do it for free. I don't care. Like, have something, right? So make sure you put something out there. I don't, for my line of work, I'm not really to consumers, so people don't generally buy my services because they saw me on social media. But social media lets them know that I'm alive and kicking. Right? If I've already had that sales engagement with them and then they go and check out my Instagram or YouTube or X or whatever, they'll see active posts and they'll go, oh, she's actually there, right? So you need to do that. But the other thing about tools is I know clearly I'm in technology, but I'm always using tools to maximize my impact. So for instance, I use QuickBooks for my accounting software. They do the payroll, and they submit all the forms. So I haven't had to hire an accountant. The platform did it. It's ridiculously expensive for a one-person shop to do that. But the great thing is when I started hiring a couple years ago, finally, after decades, you're paying like X amount for the package, but each new person, you're only adding like $5 or something like that. So there are a lot of things where, another thing was like help desk. I had so many clients I would build stuff for, and they're like, hey, can you fix this? Can you fix that? Can you fix that? I finally paid for help desk software. What at the time felt very expensive for just me on the other end. I'm like, why are they not just emailing me? But I needed a queue. I needed a way to be able to manage all my different clients, their bug fix stuff, because I had to keep that separate. It was junking up my email inbox, and I was like, I could talk about prioritization, I can't keep it straight. So to me, paying for software for me to better manage my time, better manage the client relationship, meant that I didn't have to hire a help desk technician. I'm still doing it, but the software is helping me maximize my impact. So I'm saying do look to tools that can help you with that. Understanding customer service. This is another thing where I'll say, because I had young kids, mostly, again, they're a little bit older now, but I do have freedom over my time. But the truth is, when I had babies, I had Wednesdays off, so I'd work Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Once they got bigger, I was working between school hours of 8:30 and 2:30, which means there's a lot of times, and goodness gracious, like they were off yesterday for Veterans Day, and then Columbus Day before. There's so many days off with kids, right? And you're working from home, you're constantly balancing this, right? The key I wanted to say is, I have learned a long time ago that customer service doesn't mean you solve the problem, it just means you communicate with them. There have been so many times where I'm driving kids to and back, and I'll just say, thank you so much for your email, I'll look into it. You know what it buys me? It buys me from 2 p.m. that day that I can look at it and fix it at 10 a.m. the next day, but I can kind of do that. So just saying that when you have that flexibility of time, I feel pressure to like, oh my goodness, I'm not on the clock, I'm not in the office, I can't do that. Sometimes all they want to hear is you acknowledge you got their email, and you can do that from your phone. So don't underestimate the power of setting expectations. Okay, this is a big one, profitability. This is a big, big, big one. It depends on your personality type. I'm very much of an operations kind of person. I'm very much of like, I like doing accounting and spreadsheets and that kind of stuff. I'm very type A, that's why I'm a programmer. The problem is it's really easy to get, those are all non-billable activities, right? And so I think the number one thing I've seen is like people that, let's put it this way. There are some people that have new businesses that are posting like 3 times a day on LinkedIn. If they're posting 3 times a day on LinkedIn, you know what they're not doing? The actual work, right? And so it's important to have a marketing presence and to do it strategically. I am all for that. But I'm just saying it gets really easy to get lost in the non-billable work. I know some people that just about network full time. And it can, and again, networking is great, but you could just really go from conference to conference to conference and never get paid because you're never actually doing anything, right? Again, all these things are necessary. I'm not negating this at all, but I'm just saying, so for me, I really like writing books. I was like, oh my goodness, this is my bucket list. I actually have a paper book with my name on it, SharePoint 2010. Yes, I can actually say I've done it, yes. However, it doesn't pay jack squat. Like basically I lost money. I mean, I was getting like $10 an hour to do it until the point where my husband said, you are not allowed to do this anymore, because I was missing paychecks and everything like that. It filled my bucket. It was so fun. I absolutely loved it, and it did not pay the bills. So I think we all have that. There's different business philosophies out there, these different quadrants and stuff like that. It's important to do what you love. It's also important to get paid. I mean, the whole adage is if you do what you love but you don't get paid, it's a hobby, not a job, right? So all I'm saying is you really have to watch it. So for me, the operations is where I get lost. I get into, I mean, this week it's like PCI compliance. I have to make sure the credit card processing works, and I have to file with the state of Missouri, and it's all this stuff that I could get lost in. And the problem is you get to the end of the day and you're like, I did something. You get to the end of the month and you go, where's all the money, right? So just saying you have to really stay focused on first things first. So for getting started, I kind of talked about this a little bit, but I think that you want to be able to, I started with companies I subcontracted through. Now again, I'm consulting. That may not be your line of work. But my point is I didn't jump out of the gates trying to go whole hog at first. I stepped my way up. That's the main point of this. The other thing is, the reason I have the picture of the robots is my husband is in sales, and sometimes he would sell big projects. It was like, oh, Ameren's building a new power plant. So he would sell parts for the power plant, and it could be worth, hundreds of thousands of dollars, but then once it's built, it's built. Or he could go to the equipment manufacturers and say, put my widget in your widget, and every widget that you make, I get paid, $1 per widget times 10,000, right? But it keeps going and going and going. So for me, I have found a lot of strategic partners. They're the ones that keep feeding me work. 75% of my work comes from people that go, oh, I do this, but I don't do that. And we complement each other, because I'm like, I don't do help desk stuff. And the help desk people are like, you're talking about how you organize information? I don't know. We sort of insert A in a slot B, and that's kind of it, right? So we complement each other, but they keep giving me that revenue. So you want to look for those people that are going to keep on giving. It's really easy to go for the end client, the end user, but if you can find these secondary relationships, they can help you a lot. Strategic networking. Like you say, you could network all day long, but you only have limited time, right? Time is money. So you want to find the right place to network. So for instance, I got connected with it was called the SharePoint user group. So I would start speaking at that. That was the first time I really started speaking. But then I got to know people in a trade. That was sort of, the trade group, if you want to call it, for what I do. And because of that, I got a lot of work out of it through the years. But again, when we're networking, it's very easy to say, well, I talked to someone and it didn't go anywhere. I have found that 90% of the time, they tell somebody else. So you can never dismiss the fact that, well, nothing came from that. You never know whose name they pass you on. I've had so many people who are like, oh, I was talking to so-and-so, and then they said that they knew you. So it is important to network, but I'm just saying you have to really be strategic about it. Just an example is like I live in O'Fallon, Illinois, and O'Fallon, Illinois has a really great chamber of commerce. So I've gone to a lot of the meetings there, but they're like real estate agents and bankers. And the truth is, if they are a banker, their bank set up their SharePoint and Teams implementation, who's probably based somewhere else. Their insurance company, that's State Farm. Or, I would love to work with them, but they're based in, not O'Fallon, Illinois, right? So I now go if I want to get the local gossip. And the fact is the Chamber of Commerce themselves buys licenses for me, which is great. But I'm making like, $10 a year off of them or something like that. So I'm just saying there's some places you can spend a lot of time. Some of these networking groups really have a component of like philanthropy, which is wonderful, but you have to realize if you start this group, how much time are they going to take from you, right? You really need to think about that. Okay. I'm going to sort of skip through the consulting part because I know we're getting to the end of the time here. The consulting is basically saying that a lot of times if you are consulting, you're going to run into sticky corporate situations. The benefit of being an outsider is that you're not, the reason they bring you in is you sit outside of the whole corporate politics, which is great because they'll actually listen to you. But sometimes the people internal are resenting you because they're like, hey man, we've been saying this all day long and you come in and listen to it. The key is when you're a consultant, you have to lead from behind. You have no authority. So you have to come in and make them earn your trust and say, hey man, I know they haven't listened to you. I know I'm totally on your side, but like, I'm going to say what you've been saying all along. We're going to get it done, right? Like, I'm on your side, and then you get that buy-in, right? So I'm just saying there's a lot. But again, as a business owner, I have a lot of times where the person, a CIO, will pay the money for it, and then they'll delegate it to a manager. The manager may or may not be on board. If they're not on board, I don't care what they, in the nicest possible way, I don't care what they think because they're not the ones whose signature is on my check. So I'm saying sometimes you really have to be hyper-focused if you're coming in from the outside, or not hyper-focused, but you have to be aware of like, what is the objective? The more I can get people on board with the objective, the more successful I'll be. But really, the only one I care about is the one who's going to say, you did a good job at the end. If other people are ancillary involved, that's icing on the cake, but that's really, someone hired me to do a job, so I need to do that job successfully, right? And this, again, just means sometimes as a consultant, you have to come in from the outside and jump in with a team on day one and earn their trust immediately. And that's just experience, right? You can't come in and be the know-it-all expert, or you're going to alienate everybody. So you have to be able to embed yourself with that team. All right, this last section is just some, again, okay, we've got 5 minutes left. Personal advice. This is my personal advice section, just years of experience. Working from home. Now, again, most everybody works from home anyhow. But if you're going to do it full time, please find a space that is different than where you eat or sleep. Not everybody has that luxury, but you know what? We're here at T-Rex. I have an office at Spark. There are many other lovely co-working spaces. The point is don't be on all the time. When you work for yourself, it's really easy to have no separation between home and work. Find a way to make that happen. That's my suggestion. The phone number is sort of a nice to have. That just goes back to, I don't want to always be answering my I used to, for 10 years, I had the same number. And then you're having to answer, hello, Savvy Technical Solutions. It's just weird. I'm just saying, just keep it separate. Stop second guessing yourself. This is like huge one. Okay, when I'm doing sales and selling something to a client, they will go dark on me so many times. And I'm like, I suck. What did I say? I did something wrong. They don't want to talk to me. And I thought they seemed so happy and they're not answering my phone calls. And then like 6 months later, they'll call you up like nothing happened. And they're going to be like, so, we're ready to do that project. And you're like, what the heck, right? But it's because I've learned through the years, like, oh, well, we were doing an entire other software package, or our company just got acquired, or, you know, I got promoted to a different job, or what, like, things are happening. People have things going on, and just you can't take it personally. I mean, so many times I'm like, who did they think I are to pick up and just call me? They can't treat me like that. But I've learned the empathy through the years is also saying, you know what, I can't internalize it. I can say I did the best I could. I don't know what they're going through, but when they pick up that phone to call me, I need to be just as nice as the first time I talk to them, right? Less is more. This is another thing that I think is great. And this is this sort of idea. I have a couple books down there that have this idea here, Profit First, and I really like the book Stretch. Basically, it's the idea that when we have limited resources, we become hyper efficient with it. I not only was starting my own business, but because I had kids, I basically was having to start a business and do it in like 25 to 30 hours a week. All my male colleagues had stay-at-home wives. And I was like, I had a lot of bitterness and FOMO for a lot of years. I'm like, must be nice, right? But at the same time, it meant that I was like, I can't just throw money or throw time at it. I have to, every single thing I do has to be strategic. And through that years, that has gone through, and I think that has helped me. I remember there was a lady I met that was starting a business, and I met her at the local Barnes & Noble, and I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm writing an employee handbook. And I was like, that's great. She was an event planner. I was like, have you done any events? Well, I've done one event. And I was like, I felt kind of like she was really, again, proud of what she was doing. I'm like, yes, there needs to be an employee handbook, but I think step A is like, doing what, you know, at the time, again, I was barely making ends meet because I had these little kids that were demanding my attention, my time. I'm starting my business, and I thought, must be nice to be able to sit around and write a handbook. Unfortunately, our business didn't survive. And that's, again, I'm not trying to diss her, but I'm just saying, I felt like I would have loved that luxury, but on the flip side, not having that luxury meant I was like, I have to make every second count, and that is not what is going to put bread on my table, right? So sometimes that, you don't want to have a scarcity mindset, but being efficient is not necessarily bad because your time is going to go where it needs to be. So this is just time management. I'll just say that for, like I talked about before, because I work with Microsoft technology, there's an app called Microsoft To Do. Planner is what is the task management tool in Microsoft that'll work between if you have groups that are doing task management. So this will aggregate if you have Microsoft 365, and actually I think there's a consumer version. You can get a home edition and all that. But I'll take my flagged emails. If I flag an email, I always have a due date. And then if I just write in tasks that I need to do, but I can categorize them. And basically every day it'll say, these are the tasks you didn't do yesterday. These are the tasks that are coming up due. These are the tasks you missed that are not due yet. And then it'll suggest them to me, and then I can prioritize them each day. This is how I keep my life straight. I'm not kidding, because especially I have multiple different clients going on, I lose my mind. So I'm saying this again goes back to just being able to have the tools. Planning for the future, this is another big mantra I live by. You always want to plan ahead for the next step, and it always feels like it's too expensive and too much work. Always, 100% of the time. Like you say, being able to pay for QuickBooks, I did business on my own for a decade. Running, like owning, being incorporated costs so much money compared to being your own business. You have to pay for incorporation fees and software and all this stuff. But you know what, by the time, so an example for me is the St. Louis Zoo said, hey, we want to interview you about doing Teams implementation. I was not registered anywhere for government contracting at all. I was like, oh shoot. Well, it has been like a 3-year journey for me to get certified. Women's Business Development Center and the SBA and Missouri and Illinois. And the point is when I was sitting at that table, I should have already been there, right? It's cost so much time and money, but I know the day somebody comes down and says, we want to work with you, I'm going to be like, here's my certification. I've already got it in place, right? So you always want to do the next thing. Always learn from your mistakes. Don't beat yourself up. That goes back to the second guessing. This is sort of a duh thing, but basically saying, hey, you don't lose, you just win or you learn, right? And so sometimes I have to lick my wounds and then go, okay, well, that didn't work. What do we do next time, right? I would say to follow this up, Leslie here is in the audience here. So Leslie, it's kind of funny. Leslie and I have been friends for many years. We go to the same church, and we were part of an entrepreneurship group like a decade ago, I think. So I didn't know what she was going to be talking on, and when she saw it, I was like, oh my goodness, that is a perfect dovetail into this. So she'll be speaking on Friday at Spark. And she will be, I haven't really talked much about, business and marketing and that kind of thing. So Leslie's going to be speaking more on that sort of business acquisitioning and marketing part of starting up. So if you're interested in that, please definitely join in. So with that, I think we are out of time. I'm sorry there's no time for questions here. I kind of didn't know how long that would take. But feel free to come up, and I'm happy to talk with anybody at the back if you guys have any questions. So thank you.
Thank you.